A venomous snake bit the bull's face, but a mysterious man saved it with his last breath. The wind rolled slow and dry across the Kessler ranch, dragging loose strands of hay through the dusty yard like brittle memories. The sky was already bleeding orange as the sun sank behind the hills, turning the pasture gold. Somewhere beyond the paddock, a hawk cried out, sharp, lonely. Micah's boots hit the dirt hard as he stomped out of the barn, jaw clenched, eyes hot. The screen door had already slammed behind him, and his father's voice still echoed in his ears. Last chance, boy. If that bull can't ride, he's gone by Monday. 17 years old and already exhausted by pressure he never asked for. His father's back had gone bad years ago, and now everything, the barn, the debt, the name, rested on Micah's shoulders. And Bramble? Bramble was more than a bull. He was hope, pride, a legacy with 4 legs and a temper to match. Micah rounded the paddock and stopped short. Bramble stood just inside the gate, broad-chested and restless. His nostrils flared, his muscles twitching beneath sunburned skin. One eye was swollen, angry red, with dried blood crusting around the lid. "Damn it," Micah muttered, climbing over the fence. "What did you do to yourself now?" He knelt beside the bull, careful not to startle him, and inspected the wound. Still tender, still ugly. It hadn't healed right from the fight the week before. Bramble had charged another bull during training and taken a horn to the face. Micah placed a hand gently on the bull's neck. "You're not done yet," he whispered. "I won't let them sell you." A flicker caught the corner of his eye. Movement. At the far end of the pasture, past the north fence line where no one ever wandered. A man stood there, still as a post. He looked like he'd been carved from wind and wear. Lean frame, faded denim shirt, weather-worn boots caked with travel. His hair hung in tangled curls, gray touching the edges, and a short beard shadowed his jaw like someone who'd forgotten what mirrors were for. But it was his eyes that caught Micah. Clear, pale blue, fixed on Bramble with something close to reverence. Micah straightened, cautious but curious. "You lost?" he called out. The man didn't move, didn't blink. "That bull," he finally said, voice rough as gravel but slow, deliberate. "Got more fire than most men I've known." Micah squinted. "You know bulls?" The man took a step closer, stopping just shy of the barbed wire fence. He nodded, expression unreadable. "Used to be a vet, long time ago." Micah hesitated, wiping sweat from his brow. He could see it now. The man had a limp, subtle but constant, favoring his right leg. His left hand trembled slightly, like it was used to holding tools that weren't there anymore. "You from around here?" Micah asked, half suspicious, half drawn in. The man looked toward the hills in the distance, those dry, sun-baked ridges that swallowed the horizon. Far enough to know how short time really is. Micah waited, but the man said nothing more. "Name's Micah," he offered, unsure why. "This here's Bramble." The man's eyes didn't leave the bull. "Name's Elias." Bramble let out a low grunt and pawed at the dirt, his weight shifting uncomfortably. Micah turned back to him, pulling a damp cloth from his back pocket to clean around the eye. "Not healing right," he muttered. "Tried antibiotics. Doesn't seem to be working." "You flushed the wound?" Elias asked. Micah frowned. "Twice a day." "Not enough," Elias said, taking another step forward. "That's an orbital flare-up. Infection's tucked behind the eye now. You don't get it out, he'll lose vision." Micah stared at him, uncertain. "You sure about that?" Elias nodded slowly. "I've seen it before. Same look, same twitch in the hoof." He pointed toward Bramble's front leg. "That's pain, son, not defiance." Micah glanced back at the bull and realized Elias was right. "How do you know that?" Elias paused. "Because I once lost a bull that way, and I promised I wouldn't again." Silence hung between them for a moment, carried by the wind and the buzz of distant crickets. Micah chewed the inside of his cheek. "You said you were a vet?" Elias nodded. "Not licensed anymore, not since—" He trailed off, eyes narrowing. "But I still remember how to keep things breathing." Another gust of wind swept across the pasture, and something in Micah shifted. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the way Bramble leaned toward the fence like he recognized the man. "You want to take a look?" Micah asked, voice low. Elias didn't answer right away, just set down the bag slung over his shoulder and unlatched the gate. He moved slowly, deliberately, like each step was a negotiation with pain. Bramble watched him but didn't bolt. As Elias knelt beside the animal, he pressed one hand gently against the bull's jaw, murmuring something Micah couldn't hear. Bramble didn't move. Elias examined the eye, fingers light but steady. "You got a syringe?" Micah nodded. "In the barn. Be right back." By the time he returned, Elias had pulled a small leather kit from his bag, full of old tools, tiny vials, and sealed cloth packs. He worked with practiced precision, cleaning the wound, draining fluid, and injecting something thick and amber-colored into the tissue. "What is that?" Micah asked, half-worried. "Tree resin extract. Mix of pine, lavender, and silver root. Fights infection, numbs the pain." Micah raised a brow. "That legal?" Elias offered a faint smile. "It works." He stood slowly, wiped his hands on his jeans, and gave the bull one last pat. "Keep him shaded tomorrow. No riding. He'll be stronger by Saturday." Micah watched him, still unsure. "Why are you helping?" Elias met his gaze. "Because I owed someone once, and I never paid it back." The air felt heavier now, like something had passed between them that couldn't be named yet. Micah stepped closer. "You got a place to stay?" Elias looked toward the shed near the edge of the property. "That'll do." Micah nodded. "All right then." As the sun dipped below the hills and the sky turned lavender and gold, the boy and the stranger stood in silence, watching the bull breathe a little easier. Neither of them knew that something darker was already slithering beneath the soil, waiting to strike, and it would take more than healing hands to stop what was coming. 3 days passed, and the stranger became part of the landscape. Elias never asked for a thing, not food, not water, not even thanks. He made a corner in the rusted-out tool shed his home, laying an old saddle blanket across crates and using a faded tarp to patch the leaks above. Each morning, just after sunrise, he was already moving, checking Bramble's stitches, grinding dried leaves into powder, mixing pastes with rainwater he caught in a dented tin bowl. Micah watched him work, drawn to the quiet intensity Elias carried, like a man paying off an old debt in silence. Bramble healed faster than expected. The swelling around his eye faded to a dark bruise, and his restless pacing settled into slow, deliberate strides. When Micah brought a hose near the pen, the bull didn't flinch like before. He stood still, trusted. "What is that you're putting on him?" Micah asked one afternoon as Elias smeared a greenish salve across Bramble's temple. "Marrow root, wild camphor," Elias replied without looking up. "Stuff most vets forget exists." "Where'd you learn all that?" Elias paused. Then, "From watching things die." Micah didn't push further. He just leaned on the fence and watched the man work. But not everyone welcomed Elias. Micah's father, George Kessler, kept a wary eye on him, arms crossed, lips tight, a storm always brimming just behind his eyes. "Drifters don't help for free," George warned, spitting tobacco into the dust. "They circle like coyotes, sniffing for weakness." Micah looked away. "Bramble's better because of him." "Maybe. Or maybe it's just luck. Don't forget, people like that disappear the second trouble shows up." Micah didn't believe that. At least, not yet. By the 5th evening, the air turned heavy. Not storm-heavy, but still, off, like something in the wind had shifted direction. Micah and Elias led Bramble through a training drill along the paddock's perimeter. The bull moved with steady power, his breath short and focused. "That's it," Elias said, his voice calm but firm. "Let him find his rhythm. Don't force it." Micah nodded, guiding Bramble in a slow arc. Then the bull froze. Mid-step, his ears twitched, his tail stiffened. He let out a short, guttural snort. "What's wrong?" Micah asked, but Elias had already dropped the training rope. "Back up," he whispered. "Now." Bramble took 2 clumsy steps back, his muscles quivering. Then Micah saw it. Coiled in the tall grass, barely 5 feet away, was a rattlesnake, thick-bodied, diamond-backed. Its scales caught the evening light like polished stone. Its head was raised, tongue flicking, tail buzzing low, fast. Micah's breath caught in his throat. "Holy!" Elias grabbed a rock, arm tense, but he didn't throw it right away. His face had gone pale. His lips parted slightly, not in surprise, but in recognition. "That's no ordinary rattler," he murmured. Micah glanced at him. "What's that mean?" Elias didn't answer. He hurled the stone. It struck the dirt inches from the snake's head. The creature recoiled, then slithered back into the weeds, vanishing as if the earth had swallowed it whole. Micah let out a shaky breath. "That thing could have taken Bramble out again." Elias didn't respond. Instead, he knelt slowly in the grass, eyes tracing the snake's path. Then he stood, stiffer than before, and pulled up the sleeve of his shirt. Micah's gaze caught on something just above the man's elbow, a faded tattoo, almost invisible beneath sun-worn skin, a coiled snake, its mouth open, fangs bared, wrapped tightly around a broken spur. Micah frowned. "You were military?" Elias looked down at the ink. "Once." "What unit?" "Not one they talk about anymore." He dropped the sleeve and turned back toward the tool shed, voice barely a whisper. Some things are meant to stay buried. That night, the wind howled through the eaves like it was trying to speak. Micah couldn't sleep. He stepped outside just past midnight, barefoot, the gravel cold against his skin. The moon hung low, casting silver shadows across the field. In the paddock, Bramble stood near the fence, calm but alert. Micah followed the faint glow of a lantern toward the shed. The door was cracked open. He stepped closer. Elias sat cross-legged on the floor, whispering in the dark. Micah stopped outside the doorway, listening. I saw his eyes when it struck. The same panic, the same helplessness. I wasn't fast enough then, but I'm here now. A pause. I won't fail again. Micah took a step back. His mind raced. Who had he failed? And why did that snake scare him more than anything else? Something told Micah the answer was deeper than Bramble, deeper than any wound. Elias wasn't just patching up a bull. He was trying to fix something inside himself, something that couldn't be stitched. And somewhere beneath the dust and dry wind, that something was waiting to return, waiting to finish what it started. The scream wasn't human. It split the morning like a jagged tear across the sky, cutting through the stillness just as the sun crept over the horizon. Micah sat up in the bunkhouse, heart pounding. Then he heard it again. More voices, panicked, high-pitched bellows rising from the paddocks. He shoved his boots on and ran, barely lacing them as he burst through the bunkhouse door. Gravel bit into his soles, but he didn't stop. Something in his gut twisted before his brain could catch up. Bramble. He cleared the side gate and sprinted toward the main pen. A few ranch hands were already clustered near the fence, shouting over one another. That's when he saw the blood. Bramble was bucking, his body wild with pain. Foam and saliva spilled from his mouth as he staggered sideways and collapsed onto his shoulder. His head hit the ground hard. A wet, raw wound pulsed just beneath his left eye, deep, jagged, and fresh. Micah's stomach turned. Then he saw it. Not 10 feet away, curled like it had never left, was the same rattlesnake. Bigger now, meaner, fangs gleaming with venom, its head raised, tongue flicking in the early light. It didn't slither off this time. It stared, locked in on them like it remembered, like it had come back for vengeance. "Get a gun!" someone yelled. "Kill the damn thing!" But Micah didn't move. His feet were rooted in place. Bramble kicked and groaned in pain, his body seizing, his breathing short and uneven. And then, without a word, Elias broke through the crowd. He didn't hesitate, didn't flinch. He grabbed a rusted cattle halter from the post and vaulted into the pen like a man half his age. "Micah, keep him steady!" Elias barked, voice hoarse but full of urgency. Micah snapped back into motion, running to Bramble's side. "He's gonna go into shock!" Elias knelt beside the bull, his hands already pulling tools from his belt. A knife, a rag, a small glass vial. The snake struck the fence post once, hard, but Elias didn't look. His entire focus narrowed to Bramble's swollen face. The wound was turning black at the edges. "This venom's thick," Elias muttered. "Struck right on the vein line, just like before." He didn't finish. He sliced cleanly across the swollen puncture with the knife, not deep, but precise. Blood spilled fast, dark, laced with streaks of venom. Then, without a second thought, Elias leaned down, pressed his mouth to the wound, and sucked. Micah froze. "Elias, what the hell are you doing?" Elias spat the blood aside, coughed, then went in again. The second time his hands began to tremble. The ranch hands shouted behind them, but their voices blurred into background noise. Micah looked between the bull and the man. This isn't just medicine. This is suicide. "Stop!" Micah grabbed Elias's shoulder, but the man shoved him off with more strength than expected. "I couldn't save Cal!" Elias shouted, his voice cracking. "I won't lose this one too!" "Cal?" Micah froze, confusion hitting him like a slap. His uncle Cal had died 15 years ago, gored by a rogue bull in this very pasture. Bramble's great-grandfather, in fact. The story was whispered around the ranch like a curse. Micah's father never spoke of it. Only once, when Micah was a boy, had he heard the name spoken aloud. Your Uncle Cal was fire on 2 legs, but some fires burn too fast. Micah looked down at Elias. Same eyes, same jaw, same storm. "You're his brother," Micah whispered. Elias looked up, blood running from the corner of his mouth. He nodded, slow. "I was supposed to be there that day. I was the one meant to break that bull, not him. But I bailed. I ran off with a woman and let Cal face it alone, and he paid the price." He coughed hard, deep, guttural. Foam bubbled at the corner of his mouth now. Micah's heart slammed against his chest. "You've been poisoned." Elias leaned back, gripping his side. "Not the first time, maybe the last." Micah shouted for help, but no one came close. The snake had vanished again, disappearing into the tall grass like a ghost. Bramble lay motionless, but alive, his breathing shallow, the swelling no longer spreading. Elias's hands rested on the bull's neck like he'd just pulled him back from the edge. Micah dropped to his knees beside him. "We've got to get you to the clinic." "No time," Elias said, voice now barely a rasp. "You gotta listen, boy. That bloodline, these bulls, they're not just muscle. They remember. They carry rage. Bramble's been fighting the ghost of his own grandfather." Micah stared at him, too stunned to speak. Elias grabbed his wrist, weak but firm. "He's not like the others. If you don't break him with trust, he'll break you with fear." Micah nodded, tears burning at the edge of his eyes. "You didn't fail, Elias. Not this time." Elias smiled faintly. "Took me long enough." Then he exhaled. Long, slow. His hand slid from Micah's arm. For a second everything stopped. Then Bramble stirred. Slowly he rose to his feet, wobbling, but strong enough to stand. His head turned toward Elias. The bull let out a low, haunting groan, something between a growl and a sigh. He nuzzled the man's shoulder once, then turned back toward Micah. Micah looked at Elias, his chest still, his face pale. But he didn't look afraid. He looked peaceful. From the fence line, Micah's father approached, silent for once. He stood next to his son, stared down at the man he hadn't recognized, and said only, "That's Elias Hart. Cal's little brother. Ran off the day before the rodeo. Never came back." Micah swallowed hard. He did. George said nothing more, just took off his hat and held it to his chest. But as the sun crept higher and the shadows shifted, Micah noticed something in the grass. A trail. Not just flattened weeds, but a path. Long, dark, and fresh. Leading not away from the ranch, but toward the barn. And in that moment, Micah realized something. The venom wasn't meant for Bramble. It had unfinished business. The morning sun stretched long fingers across the blood-stained pasture as Micah knelt beside Elias, his chest heaving, voice raw. "Somebody! Please!" he shouted into the wind, his cries disappearing into open air. No signal. No radio. The nearest clinic was 30 miles down a dirt road filled with ruts and broken bridges. Even if he got the truck started, Elias wouldn't make it. The old man's body convulsed, legs stiffening, arms twitching with each dying surge of his nervous system. His skin had turned pale as parchment, sweat rising in beads across his brow. Micah tore off his flannel and pressed it against Elias's chest, desperate to do something, anything. "You're gonna be okay," Micah gasped. "You hear me? You saved him. You're not done yet." But Elias didn't respond. Bramble stood close, unmoving, watching it all with a stillness that felt unnatural. The bull's breath was steady now, his wound clotting, his body calmed as if the pain had been carried off by someone else. Then, slowly, he lowered his head and pressed it gently against Elias's shoulder, not with panic, not with fear, but with recognition, as if he knew. Elias's eyes fluttered open, just barely. His lips parted, dry and cracked. His voice came out in a thin rasp. "He's strong enough now," he whispered, eyes locked on Micah. Micah leaned closer. "What?" Elias's hand jerked up and latched around Micah's wrist, surprisingly firm, burning with urgency. "Don't sell him." Micah blinked, startled. Elias pulled him closer, breath shaking. "He's not just a bull. He's legacy, heart, a fire that needs the right hands. He's meant to finish what I couldn't." Micah swallowed hard, tears beginning to cloud his vision. "I promise," he said. "I swear." And with that, Elias took one long, rattling inhale, then let it go. His hand fell limp. His eyes, still open, now stared past the sky, past the hills, into something far beyond this ranch. Micah knelt frozen, holding the man's hand as if clinging could pull him back. The silence that followed was unbearable. It wasn't just the absence of Elias's breath. It was the stillness. Then Bramble did something no one expected. The bull folded his legs and lowered himself to the earth beside the fallen man. No resistance, no restlessness. He laid his head gently across Elias's chest, like a dog mourning his master. The ranch hands finally approached, somber and slow, hats in hand. Even George Kessler stood behind the fence, speechless. The man he'd called a drifter, who he'd nearly thrown off his land, had given his life for a bull that George was ready to sell. Micah looked to his father, voice shaking. "He's Cal's brother." George blinked, the truth settling like dust on old memories. Micah turned back to the field. The sun climbed higher, the wind picked up, and then he noticed it. Not far from where Elias had died, a trail, fresh, flattened grass, the same winding pattern as before, but this time, it didn't lead away. It led toward the barn. Micah's breath caught. His gaze snapped to the barn's rear door, wide open. "Wait," he muttered. "The barn." He ran, sprinting across the pasture, boots slamming against dry dirt. He hurdled the paddock fence and reached the wide wooden doors. Inside, the smell hit first: hot hay, iron, sweat, and something else, something acrid. He turned toward the far stall, the last one. A low growl rumbled from inside. Then a flicker of movement. And there it was, the snake, coiled again, but not alone. It hovered beneath the stall of the ranch's newest bull, a black-furred behemoth named Gunmetal, bigger than Bramble, wilder. The bull hadn't been broken yet. Elias never got the chance to work with him, and now Micah understood. The venom, the rage, wasn't meant for Bramble. It was meant for Gunmetal. Micah stepped back, his breath shallow. "You're trying to poison the bloodline," he whispered, "to finish what you started." The snake hissed, louder this time, tail vibrating like a death drum. Gunmetal reared in his stall, kicking against the wood, slamming the gate with terrifying force. One more strike like that, and the snake would get inside. Micah backed out of the barn slowly, then ran, straight to the shed. He flung open Elias's bag, searched frantically: vials, herbs, blades. He shoved them into his arms and rushed back, heart hammering. Back in the barn, the snake struck the wooden plank again, splinters flying. Micah dropped to his knees, pulled a glass vial from Elias's pouch and uncorked it. The bitter smell of sulfur and lavender hit his nose. He dipped a blade in it, stood, and for the first time, he didn't freeze. He approached the snake head-on. Gunmetal thrashed behind the gate, but Micah stayed calm. He stared the snake down, lifted the blade, and said softly, "This ends here." The screen cuts to black. One last sound, a strike, then silence.